Explore the Battle of Gettysburg, one of the most important periods in American history, which was characterized by terrible fighting and enormous casualties. In addition to changing the trajectory of the Civil War, this conflict preserved important locations like Devil's Den and Little Round Top, which have since become enduring representations of bravery and selflessness. General John Bell Hood, a divisive and well-known individual whose choices and actions had a big impact on the outcome of the conflict, is at the center of this turbulent conflict. 10 years after the battle, Hood writes a passionate letter to General James Longstreet in which he reflects on the harsh realities of combat, the demands of command, and the memories that last long after the fighting has ended. Come along as we delve into Hood's life story, uncovering the complexities of his encounters and the significant impact they had on the course of the Civil War. This investigation goes beyond simply retelling a battle. It is a deep dive into the mind of a soldier coping with the fallout from combat and his legacy. Before we proceed, kindly like and subscribe to our channel to bolster our community. When reflecting on the Battle of Gettysburg, numerous names come to mind: Pickett, Hancock, Meade, McLaws, Longstreet. However, today, we will focus on General John Bell Hood. His assault on Little Round Top is recognized as one of the most pivotal moments of this historic battle. It is essential to hear his firsthand account of the events that unfolded on that momentous day, July 2nd, 1863. Years later, in 1875, General James Longstreet, who had become somewhat estranged from many former Confederates due to his change in political views, reached out to Hood. He sought Hood's insights regarding the events at Gettysburg. I would like to present the letter that Hood composed in response to Longstreet, in which he vividly recounts his experiences during the battle. I arrived with my staff at the heights of Gettysburg shortly after dawn on July 2nd. As previously noted, my division began to assemble in an adjacent open field. Here, the soldiers were allowed to stack their arms and take a brief respite while we awaited further instructions from our superiors. Not far ahead, during the early hours of that same morning, we were engaged alongside Generals Lee and A.P. Hill as we carefully monitored the positioning of the Federal troops. General Lee, attired in his full uniform with his coat buttoned tightly at the throat and his saber belt securely fastened around his waist, paced back and forth in the shade of the large trees that surrounded us. He had his field glasses at hand and would occasionally pause to scrutinize the enemy's positions more closely. He appeared to be filled with optimism, yet there were moments when he seemed absorbed in profound contemplation, reflecting on the challenges that lay ahead. Colonel Fremantle from England was situated in the fork of a tree nearby, diligently using his binoculars to observe the elevated positions occupied by the Federal Army. It was evident that General Lee was keen for us to initiate an attack that morning. He conveyed to me that the enemy was present, and if we did not overcome them, they would prevail over us. Nevertheless, I deemed it wiser to await the arrival of Pickett's division, which was still positioned in the rear, before proceeding with our plans. Later, as we sat together near the base of a robust tree, you remarked that the general appeared somewhat anxious that morning. He was urging me to attack, but I was reluctant to do so without Pickett's presence. I have always harbored reservations about engaging in battle without adequate preparation, often stating that I never prefer to enter combat with one boot off. Consequently, the morning dragged on, filled with a sense of anticipation and tension until the afternoon arrived. By around 3 o'clock, we reached a consensus. We could no longer afford to wait for Pickett's division. We decided to redirect our efforts to our far right and prepare for an assault along the Emmitsburg Road. McLaws advanced, and I closely followed with my own division. Before long, I received orders to accelerate the movement of my troops and to proceed ahead of McLaws. To facilitate this, I dispatched an advance unit tasked with dismantling fences and clearing the route for our advance. The directives I received were explicit. I was to position my division across the Emmitsburg Road, establish a battle line, and prepare to launch our offensive. However, prior to reaching the Emmitsburg Road, I resolved to send forward some of my trusted Texas scouts. Their objective was to ascertain the location of the enemy's far left flank. They promptly communicated to me that the enemy's flank was positioned at Round Top Mountain. They indicated that the landscape was open, which would enable us to navigate through a wooded pasture surrounding Round Top and potentially launch an assault on the enemy from the side and rear. Furthermore, they observed that the Federal supply trains were closely packed behind their lines, rendering them susceptible to an attack from that direction. Upon my arrival at the Emmitsburg Road, I acted swiftly. I efficiently deployed one or two artillery batteries and commenced firing, prepared to engage the enemy and alter the trajectory of the battle. A swift response from the enemy's artillery quickly disclosed their locations. Their left flank was located near Round Top, with their lines undulating, forming a concave shape as we advanced along the Emmitsburg Road. A considerable number of troops were positioned in front of their main line, situated between the Emmitsburg Road and Round Top Mountain. This contingent was arranged in battle formation on an elevation adjacent to a peach orchard. I recognized that to execute my orders and launch an attack along the Emmitsburg Road, I would first need to confront and repel this forward line of battle. Additionally, at the base and along, as we ascended the mountain slope, we encountered substantial boulders clustered together, forming narrow passages that threatened to disrupt our formation and scatter the troops as they navigated the rocky incline. Additionally, I recognized that my division would be exposed to severe fire from the enemy's primary position, which was situated at the summit of the elevated terrain, with Round Top located on the far left. Given the concave configuration of the enemy's main line, we would face devastating fire from the flanks and rear, in addition to frontal assaults. I deemed it nearly impossible to traverse the boulders on this steep, rugged mountain while enduring such crossfire and still hope to repel the enemy. I understood that any chance of success would come at a significant cost to some of the most courageous and noble soldiers ever to take part in combat. The reconnaissance carried out by my Texas scouts and the assessment of the Federal lines were accomplished in an impressively brief period, indeed faster than it has taken me to recount these details, although the events of that day remain etched in my memory as if the battle had transpired only yesterday. I had gathered these vital insights shortly after arriving at the Emmitsburg Road, leading me to feel compelled to inform you immediately of my conviction that an attack of the Emmitsburg Road, as ordered, was ill-advised. I implored you to permit me to maneuver around Round Top and strike the enemy from the flank and rear instead. Consequently, I dispatched a staff officer to communicate my request for this proposed maneuver based on the rationale I had presented. Your response was prompt. General Lee's orders were to proceed with the attack up the Emmitsburg Road. I dispatched another officer to convey my apprehensions regarding the likelihood of success for such an attack and to emphasize my request to secure Round Top. Once again, your response remained unchanged. Throughout this period, I persisted in bombarding the enemy with artillery and grew increasingly convinced that the Federal line extended to Round Top. I could not realistically anticipate achieving significant results from the attack as directed. In fact, it appeared to me that the enemy held a position of such inherent strength that I would characterize it as nearly impregnable. They could effortlessly thwart our advance by rolling boulders down the mountainside, independent of any flank fire. For the third time, I sent one of my staff officers to thoroughly articulate the situation and propose that you come to assess it personally. I selected my Adjutant General, Colonel Harry Sellers, for this mission, confident in his courage and competence. Colonel Sellers returned with the same message. General Lee's orders were to launch an attack along the Emmitsburg Road. Shortly thereafter, Colonel Fairfax from your staff arrived to reaffirm those orders. After making this urgent protest against proceeding with the attack at Gettysburg as instructed, my first and only protest throughout my military career, I commanded my line to advance and initiate the assault. As my troops moved forward, you approached me directly, and we engaged in a brief conversation. I once again conveyed my concerns and expressed my regret regarding the prohibition on maneuvering around Round Top. In response, you underscored the necessity of adhering to General Lee's directives. Subsequently, I advanced my line under intense fire. Approximately 20 minutes after arriving at the peach orchard, I suffered a serious wound to my arm and was evacuated from the battlefield. This injury effectively concluded my participation in this pivotal engagement. As I was being transported on a litter, I experienced profound distress, both emotionally and mentally, as I contemplated the fate of my courageous soldiers who were part of one of the most distinguished divisions in that esteemed army. I firmly believe that had I been permitted to execute a maneuver around Round Top Mountain, we would have not only secured that strategic position, but also succeeded in defeating the enemy. I remain respectfully yours, J.B. Hood. John Bell Hood stands out as a notable general whose narrative captivates my interest. He is a multifaceted figure in history, and I aspire to produce additional videos that delve into his personal life. Nevertheless, his assault at Gettysburg continues to be renowned to this day. The Devil's Den and Little Round Top are two of the most prominent sites from the Battle of Gettysburg, infamous for the fierce and bloody clashes that occurred there. The assaults at these locations represent some of the most brutal episodes of the entire Civil War, characterized by intense combat and significant casualties. However, what renders the events of that day even more intriguing is the personal account provided by General John Bell Hood. It is crucial to recognize that Hood penned this account a decade after the conclusion of the war. This temporal distance raises significant questions regarding the accuracy of his recollections. Can we genuinely trust everything he described? Is it feasible that he recalled the events precisely as they transpired? Human memory is notoriously unreliable, and as time elapses, details may become obscured or distorted. Hood did not document his thoughts immediately following the battle, which introduces an additional layer of ambiguity to his account. Nevertheless, his correspondence with General James Longstreet provides a compelling insight into his experiences and viewpoints during one of the war's pivotal moments. Furthermore, Hood's reflections offer significant understanding of the mindset of a Confederate general contending with the tumult of battle and the burdens of command. His vivid portrayals and emotive language contribute to a vivid representation of the dire circumstances encountered by soldiers on that momentous day. Unfortunately, just 4 years after penning this moving letter, John Bell Hood died in New Orleans. His life and military service continue to captivate historians and Civil War aficionados alike. As we further investigate his legacy, I anticipate exploring more about his personal life and the intricacies of his character in upcoming discussions. Hood's actions at Gettysburg and the wider ramifications of his military choices remain influential in the examination of the Civil War. It is essential to recognize the significant influence that these battles exerted on the trajectory of American history. I trust that this personal narrative from General John Bell Hood will enhance your comprehension of the occurrences at Gettysburg and the intricate challenges encountered by soldiers during the Civil War. Please remain engaged for additional videos of this nature, as I intend to share more personal stories from various historical battles. I appreciate your presence today and eagerly anticipate our next meeting.